My name's Charlie Winter. I'm an Associate Fellow at the International Centre for Counter-Terrorism and a Senior Research Fellow at the International Centre for the Study of Radicalisation at King's College. So today I spoke about how the Islamic State is communicating its way through the attack on Mosul. So how over the last 12 weeks or so it's managed to navigate, essentially, this inexorable loss of territory and this unavoidable loss of military power in its foremost stronghold in the city of Mosul. Essentially, it's going about it in a few different ways. So it's, first of all, deriding the mainstream media. It's saying that this is false. It's saying that all of this news of the Islamic State losing territory in eastern, southern, and most recently northern Mosul is all Crusader lies. It's part of an intellectual invasion that is being driven or orchestrated by the coalition itself. On top of that, though, and aside from the censorship that they're doing in the strongholds of the Islamic State, so not just Mosul, but in Raqqa and Al-Bab and so on and so forth, they're also trying to replace the mainstream media with their own media narrative, with their own propaganda narrative. And it's a very comprehensive, very regular, and highly varied propaganda narrative that doesn't just rely on one thing, but gives a full picture of what not only life in the Islamic State continues to be like in Mosul, but also spinning the campaign against Mosul in a very particular direction. It's essentially arguing that everything happening in the city right now is going to plan. It's going according to not only the plan set by the strategists of the Islamic State, but also a plan which is spoken about in the prophetic Sunnah and Hadith. So talking again about the apocalypse, reaffirming the fact that the apocalypse is nearing, essentially, but also saying that just because territory is being lost, this doesn't mean that the Islamic State project is suffering. It doesn't mean that it's going anywhere. In fact, it is confirmation that it's all going in the right direction. So just briefly, the four areas that the Islamic State, or four themes that the Islamic State is communicating regarding Mosul, can be broken down into a few different, fairly distinct categories, which overlap, of course, a huge amount. So first of all, you have the direct outreach to supporters and the direct outreach to adversaries. So this is literally fighters speaking to a camera, rather like I am now, and explaining to the camera that the fight is going well, that they are remaining steadfast and courageous, and that again, the prophecy is coming true regarding Mosul. Essentially trying to instill and incite others around the Islamic State to fight in the Islamic State's name and to avoid defection, that kind of thing. When it's direct outreach to adversaries, this is the gory stuff, the brutal stuff, where fighters kill, often children these days, kill alleged spies for whether it's the Kurdish Peshmerga or the ISF or captured soldiers and so on and so forth. They're trying to show that they remain defiant in the face of military loss or seemingly impending military loss in Mosul. And this is something which is really important to buoy morale among ideological supporters and political supporters of the group. Next, there's the idea of victimhood. This is a very prominent theme and has become even more prominent over the last few months in the context of Mosul. So this is where they take a video of the aftermath of an airstrike, a coalition airstrike or an ISF airstrike, where they really emphasize the civilian collateral damage that's being caused by the campaign against Mosul. This becomes a sort of strategic context, an atmosphere that everything that the Islamic State does, all of its actions, all of its brutality, it's all embedded within this atmosphere of victimhood. This is the Islamic State protecting the Sunni Muslims of Iraq. It is the Islamic State not as a vanguard, but as a direct protector of the people. Next, there is the idea of the Utopia, so the Caliphate Utopia. For a very, very long time, as I've shown in past research, the Islamic State's chief aim in its propaganda has been to convey a sense of civilian governance, civilian utopia that's underwritten by Islam, and the industry, economy, education, justice system, all of it is framed within Islam, but it is essentially a utopia, a place that the Muslim today can go and live as if they were living at the time of the Prophet. And of course, this is just the Islamic State's framing of it, but because their propaganda is so, there's so much of it, essentially. Because there's so much of it, and because it's so well calibrated and comprehensive, it's a very holistic view of life. It's a very holistic carefully constructed reality that the Islamic State continues to pump out even today from Mosul. So even from neighbourhoods which are near the front lines, they will show apparently normal economic life, normal agricultural life still going on today, and that is part of their way of kind of denying what's happening in the city. The last and most important, in this context, most important theme that's coming across in Islamic State propaganda is this idea of defensive military triumphalism. So whether it's showing tank hunters, as they call them, essentially people destroying tanks, Abrams tanks, or whether it's showing suicide bombers, or whether it's just showing the general urban fighting and attrition warfare that the group's undertaking in the city and its environs, it's really, really important to the group to be able to show, or at least to be able to argue, that what's happening right now is all part of its plan. It's been preparing for this battle for a number of years now, and yes, it's fighting a defensive war right now, but this will very quickly turn into an offensive one. And it's all about draining the resources of the ISF, the Peshmerga, the coalition, and so on and so forth. This is a narrative that is coming through very, very strongly in the Islamic State's propaganda regarding Mosul, whether it's from the Amaq news agency in its newspaper, or on its radio station, or in its videos and photo reports. It's a very consistent and powerful, and quite potent, if you're a believer in the cause, potent way of reframing the conflict. And all in all, when these four general areas of propaganda come together to strategically communicate the campaign around Mosul, it not only distracts from the territorial losses, but it also pushes it onto a different thing. It allows the Islamic State to reframe loss as actually impending victory, and that's quite a remarkable thing.